the importance for a soldier to be multi-skilled. So these are some of the lessons at the tactical level. Together, I think all of them have great relevance in our context.
In the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, we saw the use of drones changing the nature of war and the potential outcome. We've seen jet planes flying over the water being used to dramatic effect, at least in war games. And we've seen cyber attacks, especially the capabilities that China is said to have built. And as a citizen, I wonder, General Pande, how prepared is the armed forces for this, the new phase of war, which is driven more by technology as much as it is by boots on the ground?
That's a very relevant question. Modernization and technology infusion has been central to our capability development plans. And our attempt has been to see as to how we can leverage the niche as well as disruptive technologies for better use in warfare. And to that extent, we have taken a number of measures to modernize. Of course, one of it is to make sure that we have the right balance of old and the new. We have niche technologies. How can we exploit their limitless potential? We have a very vibrant startup ecosystem in the country. We have young, bright minds who are prepared to come up. Our defense industry has stepped up. We have made an outreach to a number of academic institutes, academia, to project our issues, and they have come up with some very good solutions, which we are currently working on. What we are specifically also focusing is in the domain of artificial intelligence, quantum key distribution, and the rest, blockchain. So as we go forward, our attempt is to leverage this potential that is available within the country and see as to how best we can use it.
You're an engineer. You understand technology better than most generals who've been chiefs so far, just by virtue of your upbringing and your background. And I wonder how difficult it has been for you to transform the armed forces, given that this is thinking that's built in the DNA of the Indian armed forces, which is an infantry first, artillery, armored corps kind of thinking, to now having a more engineer first, no longer a support arm, but essentially the arm that could potentially decide the outcome on the battlefield.
Since you mentioned of transformation, let me spend some time on as to how I visualize transformation taking place. Transformation, largely, the way we look at it is to enable us to become a more modern, more agile, more battle-ready force to be able to meet our future challenges in a more effective manner. Largely, the purpose of the transformation that we're looking at is to increase our operational efficiencies and enhance operational effectiveness. And this transcends also into functional and administrative domains. I'm looking at transformation in 5 key areas. And the first one is force optimization and restructuring, wherein we're looking at the legacy establishments, legacy institutes, some of which may have lost relevance in the present day situation, to right size them so as to optimize manpower, get our tooth to tail ratio right. The second, of course, pillar is the modernization and technology infusion. The third, and perhaps equally important, is the human resource management about the Agnipath scheme, and of which maybe we can talk later. Fourth is the jointness and integration. And fifth is further refining, modifying our systems, processes, and functions. So these are the 5 key domains where we are looking at as to how transformation must take place. We have identified key deliverables, prepared a roadmap, laid down responsibilities. And while we are transforming, we are fully cognizant of the fact, considering our active borders, we can't let the guard down. So the operational readiness or preparedness has to continue to remain of a very high level while all this is happening.
We've seen in Russia and China, to some extent in Pakistan, they just bring the best tech minds, young, fresh tech minds, not necessarily trained at the National Defense Academy or the IMA, but young, bright tech minds to help and play a role in cyber warfare. We don't do this at scale. We do it in bits and drabs, but we don't do it at scale. Is that something that you hope to push through, bring in young technologists and have them play a role in national security, especially in cyber warfare?
No, no, absolutely. And one of the things that we are looking at is in the niche domains where you take long time to train and become an expert, such as cyber or even, let us say, Mandarin language. We are looking at recruiting young, bright boys and girls into the army. We have made a beginning by recruiting them in the territorial army. We have started with Mandarin-speaking, officers who are coming in, and subsequently we will graduate towards those who are experts in the cyber domain and the rest. At the soldier level, our aim is through the Agnipath scheme, try and get in as many technical, youth, technologically adept youth who are either ITI qualified or have been through the polytechnic. So the overall threshold in understanding on technical issues of our soldier enhances. So that has been one of our key areas.
One of your KRAs is to implement the Agniveer scheme. We saw a lot of backlash on the streets from the opposition when the scheme was first announced. How is the implementation been so far, and to what extent do you believe, sir, this will help cut the flab of the Indian Army and make it a more lean, mean fighting machine?
Let me start by saying, even at the cost of repetition, I think this is a transformational reform which has brought about a paradigm shift in the way our human resource management was taking place. I would not go into the benefits of the scheme because I think it has been discussed and talked about at length. But I think it is a win-win situation, not only for us as the military, but also for the society and the country at large. But what I believe is getting the implementation right is the key, and that is what currently we are focusing on. As you are aware, the first two batch of Agniveers have already started their training at the respective regimental centers. In the next batch, we have even modified our intake, wherein we will now have a combined entrance exam, online exam first, and the medical and the physical later. So the Agniveer, the initial feedback, what I get from the regimental centers is the youth who have come up are very enthusiastic, energetic. There is a lot of positivity. So I think that's a very good sign. But as we go forward, there are 5-6 issues which we need to be very cognizant of. The initial training of the recruits, since we have compressed the time frame, that is very critical, and that is where again we are bringing in simulators and other technological means to account for this compressing in time. Secondly, we have to make sure that when the Agniveers join our units, combat units, their assimilation and integration and acceptance into the system happens well. And that is where I think the role of junior leaders, right from a JCO up to company commander, battalion commander, that comes in well. Most importantly, since it's a new scheme, it's a unique scheme, we have to constantly keep our ear to the ground so that we have a mechanism of feedback, and we will bring about any positive, constructive changes, modification to the scheme to make it happen.
I want to spend some time on the state of play at the line of actual control. This has been one of the contested issues on the political domain, where the charge is that the government of the day, the armed forces, haven't been transparent about the actual situation on the line of actual control between India and China. As the man whose primary task it is to keep all of us safe, can you give us a sense of play of how the situation is in your view across the line of actual control, and especially in Depsang and Demchok, the two sectors where the Indian and the Chinese armies are still not being able to disengage?
Right. So overall, I would say that the situation along the line of actual control is stable, but we need to keep a very close watch on the situation as it develops. As far as the deployment of forces by the adversary is concerned, there has been no significant reduction in the deployment. There are laid great focus on modernization of forces, especially those deployed opposite the line of actual control. The infrastructure development on the other side is coming about at a very hectic pace. be it the road infrastructure in terms of the highways which run along the LAC, be it the upgradation of airfields and heliports, or in fact, the Shiakong villages, the border villages, 682 out of which are planned to come up. Now, these are some major developments which we need to take note of, especially in the context of the adversary's ability to mobilize troops. So that is one. As far as what we are doing, I think we have a very robust deployment all along the LAC in all the three sectors. And I must also mention we have adequate reserves to deal with any contingencies. With the infusion of new technology, new weapon systems, our capability development is an ongoing endeavor. Equally, we are focusing on infrastructure development, especially forward area roads, helipads, etc. So overall, I think in terms of our deployment is robust, our preparedness levels are high. From the winter months, as we now transit into the summer months, so we have undertaken minor changes, as you would do in a summer posture. So this, in a nutshell, as far as resolution of outstanding issues, through diplomatic and military talks and process of dialogue, we have been able to resolve certain friction points. Some are still remaining. At the military level, you have the senior higher military commanders meetings, which last happened in December, and you have the WMCC, which is more at a political level, or the diplomatic level, which happened sometime in February. So as we continue to talk and engage with the other side at these parallel levels, I think we can look for resolution as we go forward.
Beijing seems to be sending the message that this is the new normal, that things are where they believe things should be. What's your assessment of the enemy's strategic objective? Second, do you think this is the new normal, that the LAC will be like the line of control where the army will be deployed 24/7 at high altitudes regardless of the weather? See, there is an SCO summit mid-year, then the leadership summit of the G20 nations in September, Xi Jinping likely to come to India. India being very clear that the current situation along the LAC is not acceptable. Does that offer a window possibly for resolution? Do you think we just have to brace up for China being boots on the ground across the line of actual control, and that is the new reality the Indian Army needs to contend with?
Like I mentioned, it is only through dialogue and talking to each other that we can find resolution. And in the balance friction point, that is what our aim and endeavor is. And till that time happens, till such time that happens, I think our deployment of forces, our alertness level will continue to remain of a very high level.
For the longest time, India's military posture was more towards Pakistan than towards China. Now the Pakistani army, for the first time in its institutional history, being challenged and questioned from within. How does that impact your understanding of what's happening along the line of control between India and Pakistan? Has the threat from Pakistan to some extent come down, given the internal challenges that the Pakistani army is facing, and given the fact that at the political and military level, India has made very clear that if there is to be any kind of terror attack on Indian soil, there will be consequences the Pak army will need to deal with?
Right. So in terms of the domestic situation in Pakistan, be it the political instability, the economic downturn, or the internal security challenges, all that notwithstanding, I think we need to be extremely alert in terms of what happens on the line of control as well as further down on the international boundary. As far as present situation goes, along the LC, we have a very robust counter-infiltration grid. There has been reduction in infiltration attempts, but what we see is because of our effective infiltration grid in the valley, you find more attempts towards the international border sector further south. Also the use of drones for sort of, shall I say, putting across explosive material, weapon system, drugs is another trend that we have noticed. But largely the infiltration, I would say the numbers have significantly reduced. But what is also of concern is that there is no major significant reduction in the terror infrastructure on the other side. The reports tell us that the camps do exist. And so the attempts at infiltration might continue, of course, to which we are well prepared. In the hinterland, in the Jammu Kashmir area, I think there has been significant, again, reduction in violence parameters. We've also noticed a change in strategy from the other side, wherein you now have certain proxy tanzeems who have come up and they're targeting or they're resorting to targeted killings. I feel largely to make it visible and to gain more publicity and visibility. But I think in concert with other security agencies, we are doing well there and making sure that the situation remains stable, the environment is secure for a number of development initiatives and other activities.
It's also interesting, I don't know if you've noticed, how there is so much commentary in Pakistan comparing the bank balances of Pak Army generals with those of the Indian Army. I'm not going to get into what those reports say, but there's a lot of discomfiture in Pakistan when they compare the crores and crores and all the land banks that Pak Army generals have built in comparison with the Indian Armed Forces, and thank God for that, gentlemen. I want to ask you about the idea of Atmanirbhar Armed Forces, which is a key push towards indigenization. The concern is, does this then put the armed forces at the disadvantage of having to do with technology which isn't at the very cutting edge? If you bought something in an international tender, you could potentially pick the latest technology available to you. If you're building those capacities internally, it's fantastic in the long run, but in the short to medium term, does it disadvantage you?
In response to your first question, I mentioned one of the lessons from the Russia-Ukraine conflict was that unless countries are self-reliant, unless they have secure supply chains, it will be difficult for them to address security challenges as we move forward in the future. And to that extent, I think the focus on Atmanirbharta or self-reliance is extremely, it's a positive step. And there are a number of benefits in doing so, which I don't have to recount here. But suffice to say that as far as we in the military are concerned, we are fully complementing the overall focus. We are doing or playing our role well in terms of being facilitators of government policy, in terms of providing a viable market. And the figures will tell you for the last couple of years, our emphasis on Atmanirbhar or indigenous products has been significant. Insofar as your question of, the reduction on dependence on the import during this interim period, yes, that's a very relevant point. But I'm happy to say that even the indigenous industry has stepped up, and we are extremely hopeful and positive that this gap, we will be able to address it in a very satisfactory manner.
I want you all to notice the general's new combat fatigues, very different from the combat fatigues you would have seen growing up. And this is also in some ways a more digital print that you have. There are tanks and ships at different places in these fatigues. And I'm told that you have an IPR for this.
Well, today is Friday, and this is the dress of the day as far as we are concerned. So across the army on Fridays, we wear the combat uniform. And this is something which we got it designed in a very technical manner with all the experts putting their heads. And this is going to be our uniform for the future, wherein we will introduce it in a phased manner based on the production capacities and the rest of it. Yes.
It's also a digital print at a time when you are fighting a digital war, and to have an engineer, as I started this session by saying, at the helm of the armed forces is very significant, because you think differently from the others, and that's the kind of different thinking that we need to shape the preparation of our armed forces. General Manoj Pande, for coming to the inaugural session of the India Today Conclave and for helping us get off to such a fantastic start. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and we wish you and the armed forces all the very best. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Rahul. May I please request both of you to remain on stage while I call upon Mr. Vikram Pava, President, BMW India, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to the General. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise a warm applause for the Chief of the Army Staff, General Manoj Pande. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking out the time. Thank you. Once again, thank you, General Manoj Pande, Chief of the Army Staff, for kickstarting our 20th edition of the India Today Conclave. Just give us about a minute's turnaround time, and what we have next is a first for us, viewers. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never really ever done it. In our 20th year, we are excited about introducing, for the first time, a series of short vision statements by different impact makers and intellectuals who examined, captured the kaleidoscopic nature of what India is today with all its diversity, coming together to make the India movement. Our next session, titled India, Ideas of India, Inspiration and Interrogation, What Imperils Us, What Makes Us Soar. It's sponsored by Hitachi. Like I said, it's a first for us. We have impact makers from cutting across party lines, all walks of life, coming out and giving out what their vision statement is on how they look at new India. Before I call upon our esteemed speakers, I want to just quickly play a short film on the India moment, of where we stand today, what makes it all come together.